Jake Morrison lay perfectly still on the cold metal floor. His body did not move. His eyes did not open. The machines around him beeped slowly, showing weak signs of life. To anyone watching, he looked like a broken man who might die at any moment. But Jake was not dying. He was listening. The alien voices spoke in clicks and hisses around his cell. Jake's brain implant translated every word, storing each conversation in his memory. He had been pretending to be unconscious for 12 days. Now, the aliens thought they had captured a weak human. They were wrong. Dr. Lisa Carter sat in the next cell, watching Jake through the clear wall between them. She had seen the aliens drag him in 3 weeks ago. His clothes were torn and bloody. His face was covered in cuts. The aliens threw him on the floor like a broken toy and left him there. Lisa was a doctor. She knew when someone was dying, but something about Jake felt different. Sometimes, when the aliens were not looking, she thought she saw his fingers move just a little, or his breathing change slightly, but it was so small she wondered if she was imagining it. The alien ship was called the Kethaver. Lisa learned this by listening to the crew talk. The ship was huge, with gray metal walls and bright white lights that never turned off. The aliens who ran it were called Zephyrians. They looked like tall lizards with 4 arms and yellow eyes. Their skin was green and covered in small scales. Chief Researcher Velthic was the worst of them all. He was the one who did the experiments. Every day, he would take humans from their cells and bring them to his laboratory. Lisa had seen him take 12 people in the past month. Only 3 came back. Those who returned were changed, broken. They could not speak or eat properly anymore. Velthic studied Jake often. He would stand outside the cell and watch him for long minutes. Sometimes he would bring other aliens to look to. They would point and make their clicking sounds. Lisa heard them say words like defective and brain damaged. They thought Jake's mind was gone. Captain Nexmer visited the prison area once. Each week, he was bigger than the other Zephyrians, with darker scales and red markings on his face. When he looked at the humans, his yellow eyes showed no feeling at all. To him, they were just things to be sold. Jake heard everything they said about their plans. The Zephyrians were part of a group that stole humans from space colonies. They would attack human ships, take the people, and sell them to buyers across the galaxy. Some humans became slaves, others were used for experiments. A few were kept as pets by rich aliens who thought humans were exotic animals. The New Horizon had been Jake's home. It was a colony ship carrying 5,000 people to a new world. Jake worked as the ship's security chief. He had been a soldier before that, fighting in wars that most people tried to forget. His body had metal parts inside it that made him stronger and faster than normal humans. His brain had a computer chip that helped him remember everything and understand alien languages. When the Zephyrians attacked the New Horizon, Jake fought back. He killed 6 of them before they knocked him unconscious with some kind of electric weapon. When he woke up, he was on their ship. Most of the other humans from his colony were already dead or gone. Jake made a choice that first day he could try to fight and die quickly, or he could wait, learn, and plan. He chose to wait. So he slowed his heartbeat using meditation techniques from his military training. He made his breathing shallow and quiet. His brain implant helped by controlling his body functions. To the alien scanners, he looked like a human whose mind had been damaged beyond repair, but inside his head, Jake was working. He counted guard shifts. He memorized the layout of the ship. He learned which aliens were cruel and which ones just followed orders. He studied their weapons and their weaknesses. Every piece of information went into his enhanced memory, building a map of how he would escape and fight back. Dr. Carter did not know about Jake's plan, but she was smart. She started leaving small signs to test if he was really unconscious. She would move her water cup to different spots on her cell floor. The next day, she would see Jake's hand in a slightly different position. It was their secret way of talking without words. The other human prisoners were not so lucky. Sam Blake was an engineer from a mining station. The aliens had broken his legs during his capture. Rachel Stone had been a teacher on a passenger ship. She cried every night, calling for her children, who were probably dead. There were for others, but they rarely spoke anymore. The experiments had taken too much from them. Veltha grew frustrated with Jake. The researcher wanted to cut open his brain to see why he was not responding, but Captain Nexmer had other plans. He said a buyer on the planet Korath Prime collected broken humans. This buyer paid good money for specimens that other people did not want. Jake heard this conversation and felt cold anger fill his chest. They talked about him like he was a thing to be sold. They laughed about the humans they had killed. They made jokes about the experiments they would do tomorrow, but Jake did not move. He did not show his anger. He kept listening and learning. Each day made him more dangerous. But the aliens could not see it. They saw only a weak human who could not fight back. Jake Morrison was many things. He was a soldier, a protector, and a survivor, but most of all, he was patient. He would wait for the right moment. Then he would show these aliens what humans could really do when they decided to fight back. The Zephyrians thought they had won. They thought Jake was just another broken prisoner. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison first opened his eyes on the alien ship, but the Zephyrians still thought those eyes saw nothing. They were wrong about many things. Jake had learned to count time by the sound of the ship's engines. The big machines made different noises during the day and night cycles. His brain implant recorded every sound, every vibration, every small detail that might help him later. Dr. Lisa Carter had figured out Jake's secret communication system. When she moved her food bowl to the left side of her cell, it meant the guards were coming. When she put it on the right, it meant it was safe to make small movements. Jake would respond by moving his fingers or shifting his head slightly. It was dangerous, but it kept them both sane. The ship held 47 Zephyrians. Jake knew this because he counted their voices, their footsteps, and their breathing patterns. His enhanced hearing could pick up sounds through the metal walls. He memorized which alien worked which shift, who was lazy, and who paid attention to details. Chief Researcher Velthic visited Jake every morning at the same time. The alien would stand outside the cell for exactly 12 minutes, watching and taking notes on a small device. Sometimes he brought students with him, young Zephyrians who were learning how to experiment on other species. Jake listened to these lessons and learned horrible things. The Zephyrians had been taking humans for 6 months. They had attacked 15 human colonies and captured over 2,000 people. Most were sold as slaves. Others became test subjects for new drugs and surgeries. The Zephyrians thought humans were perfect for experiments because they were similar. Too many other species, but cost less to replace. During medical examinations, Jake had to be very careful. Velthic would strap him to a table and run scanners over his body. Jake's implants could create false readings, making his brain activity look almost dead. But he had to time it perfectly. Too much activity and they would know he was awake. Too little and they might think he was actually dying. The hardest part was staying still when they hurt him. Velthic liked to test human pain responses. He would stick needles into Jake's arms and legs, then watch the monitors for reactions. Jake used his military training to separate his mind from his body. The pain was real, but he could push it away and focus on gathering information. Jake learned about Zephyrian biology during these sessions. Their scales were hard, but had soft spots near the joints. Their forearms made them strong, but also made them clumsy in tight spaces. Most importantly, their large eyes were very sensitive to certain kinds of light. Jake's implants recorded the exact frequencies that made them uncomfortable. Captain Exmer came to the prison level once a week to check on the merchandise. That was what he called the human prisoners, merchandise, like they were boxes of food or machine parts. Jake hated that word, but he kept his anger hidden and listened to what the captain said. Dexmer talked about their next target, a human research station near the Vega system. It had 300 people and valuable equipment. The captain planned to attack it in 2 weeks. He wanted to capture the scientists alive because they would sell for more money than regular colonists. Jake also learned about the buyers. Most were criminals from different alien species who used human slaves for dangerous work. But some were worse. There were aliens who collected humans like toys, keeping them in cages for entertainment. Others bought humans for illegal medical experiments that their own governments would not allow on their own people. The worst buyer was someone called the Collector on Korath Prime. This alien paid huge amounts for rare or unusual humans. Velthic wanted to sell Jake to the Collector because damaged humans were considered very rare. Most died before they could be transported. Dr. Carter was scheduled to be sold to a mining operation in the Outer Rim. She would spend the rest of her life working in tunnels, breathing poisonous air until her lungs gave out. When Jake learned this, he had to work very hard to keep his heart rate steady. Sam Blake and Rachel Stone were going to different buyers. Sam would fix machines for a crime boss until his broken legs made him too slow to work. Rachel would teach alien children how to speak human languages until the stress drove her insane. Jake memorized every detail about these sails. He knew which ships would come to pick up prisoners. He knew the routes they would take and when they would arrive. His brain implant calculated travel times and mapped star systems, building a complete picture of the trafficking network. But Jake needed more than information. He needed to understand his enemies as individuals. So he studied their personalities and habits. Velthik was proud and cruel. He believed Zephyrians were superior to all other species. He enjoyed causing pain and called it science. But he was also careless. He often left equipment unlocked and did not check his tools after experiments. Captain Ixmer was greedy, but smart. He had built this trafficking operation over many years. He trusted no one completely and kept backup plans for everything. But he had one weakness. He loved to brag about his success to other criminals. His communications were not as secure as he. What? The ship's security chief was named Korthovan. He was younger than the others and more nervous. He checked the human cells 6 times each day, always following the same route. He carried the weapons, but kept them both on his right side because his left arm had been injured in an old fight. Jake filed away every weakness, every habit, every small detail that might be useful. His enhanced memory never forgot anything. Names, faces, voices, schedules, weapon locations, security codes he overheard, ship layouts he glimpsed during transport to the medical bay. It all went into his mental database. The hardest part was watching other humans suffer while he did nothing. Every day, Velthik took someone for experiments. Jake heard their screams through the walls. He saw them come back changed or not come back at all. His soldier instinct screamed at him to act, to fight, to protect the innocent. But Jake had learned patience in wars that most people could not imagine. He knew that acting too soon would save no one. The right moment had not come yet. When it did, he would be ready. Dr. Carter was getting weaker. The alien food was making her sick, as she had injuries from her capture that were not healing properly. Jake knew she might not survive much longer. That knowledge burned in his chest, like acid, but he used it to fuel his planning. Jake Morrison had been many things in his life: a soldier, a security officer, a protector of human colonies. But lying on that cold alien floor, he was becoming something new, something the Zephyrians could not understand or predict. He was becoming their worst nightmare, a human who had nothing left to lose and everything to remember. The 4th week began with something different. Jake felt it in the ship's vibrations before he heard the alarms. The Kethover was changing course, moving faster than usual. His enhanced senses picked up the excitement in the Zephyrian voices, echoing through the halls. Jake lay still and listened as Captain Ixmer's voice came over the ship's communication system. The captain was speaking to his crew, but Jake's implant translated every word. A human ship was in distress nearby. The vessel was called the Golden Eagle, and it was sending out emergency signals. Something cold moved through Jake's chest. He knew the ship name. The Golden Eagle belonged to Pete Walsh, his old commanding officer from the war. Pete was a smuggler now, but he had been the best soldier Jake ever served with. If Pete was here, it was not an accident. Dr. Carter noticed Jake's change immediately. His breathing had shifted slightly, and his fingers moved just a fraction. She had learned to read these tiny signs over the past weeks. Something was happening. The Zephyrians were excited about their new prize. Velthik talked about how many humans might be on a freight ship. Captain Ixmer calculated how much money they could make. Security Chief Korthovan ordered his guards to prepare capture equipment. But Jake was thinking about something else. The distress signal from the Golden Eagle was not random radio noise. It was broadcasting on a specific frequency that only military personnel would recognize. His brain implant was picking up coded messages hidden in the static. Pete was not in distress. Pete was hunting. Jake had to make a choice. He could stay hidden and wait for a better opportunity, or he could act now, while the Zephyrians were distracted by their new target. The risk was enormous. If he failed, everyone would die. But if he did nothing, Pete's ship would be captured and more humans would suffer. The ship's lights dimmed as they entered night cycle. Most of the crew would be sleeping soon. Jake had memorized their schedules perfectly. He knew that in 2 hours, only 12 Zephyrians would be awake, 6 on the bridge, 4 in engineering, and 2 guards in the prison section. Jake began to move. It was the first time in 4 weeks that he had moved on purpose. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. His joints were stiff from staying in the same position for so long. but his enhanced biology helped him push through the pain. The first challenge was his restraints. The Zephyrians had put metal bands around his wrists and ankles. The bands were connected to the wall by short chains. Jake had studied these restraints for weeks. Looking for weaknesses, he found what he needed in his own body. Jake dislocated his left shoulder, pulling the joint apart with careful pressure. The pain was terrible, but it made his arm narrow enough to slip through the wrist band. He had to bite his tongue to keep from making noise. Once his left arm was free, Jake could reach the control panel next to his cell. The Zephyrians thought humans were too primitive to understand their technology. They were wrong. Jake's military training included alien systems, and his brain implant had recorded the security codes by watching the guards input them. The cell door opened with a soft hiss. Jake rolled his shoulder back into place, gritting his teeth against the pain. His enhanced biology would heal the damage in a few hours, but right now he had to work through it. Dr. Carter was awake, watching him with wide eyes. She had suspected he was not really unconscious, but seeing him move freely was still a shock. Jake put his finger to his lips, then pointed to the cameras in the ceiling. He had disabled the ones watching his cell, but the corridor cameras were still active. Jake moved like a shadow through the ship. For weeks of listening had taught him every sound the Kethover made. He knew which floor panels creaked and which walls carried voices. He knew the blind spots in the camera system and the timing of the automated security sweeps. The first guard was easy. The young Zephyrian was half asleep at his post, reading something on a small screen. Jake came up behind him and pressed specific points on his neck. The alien's nervous system shut down instantly. It was a technique Jake had learned from studying Zephyrian anatomy during his medical examinations. Jake took the guard's weapons and communication device. The weapon was an energy pistol that could stun or kill depending on the setting. The communication device let him listen to the crew's conversations throughout the ship. The second guard was more alert, but Jake had advantages the alien could not see. His enhanced reflexes let him move faster than normal humans. His implant helped him calculate the exact angle and force needed for each attack. The guard went down without making a sound. Jake freed Dr. Carter first. She was weak but determined to help. Together, they moved to the other cells. Sam Blake was unconscious from the day's experiments, but he was alive. Rachel Stone was awake and ready to fight despite her injuries. The other prisoners were in worse shape. Two could barely walk. One was unconscious and might not survive. But Jake had learned in the war that you never leave anyone behind if you can help it. Jake armed his fellow humans with weapons taken from the guards, but his real weapon was knowledge. He knew where every crew member would be sleeping. He knew which systems to disable to cripple the ship. He knew exactly how to turn the Zephyrians' own technology against them. Dr. Carter helped Jake reach the ship's medical bay. She knew which drugs would help with his injuries, and which ones would keep the other prisoners functional. Jake injected himself with Zephyrian stimulants that would keep him alert despite the pain. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Captain Exmer was talking to someone on the Golden Eagle. Jake listened to the conversation and smiled for the first time in for weeks. Pete Walsh was playing his role perfectly, pretending to be a desperate freight captain with a ship full of valuable cargo. Jake accessed the ship's internal communication system. He had codes now, taken from the guards. His voice went out to every speaker on the Kethover, but he did not speak in English. He spoke in perfect Zephyrian, using words he had learned from weeks of listening. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You are all going to die tonight." The effect was immediate. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Zephyrian voices shouted in panic and confusion. How could a human speak their language? How could a prisoner access their systems? How could the brain-damaged specimen from the prison cells be giving orders? Jake Morrison was no longer pretending to be helpless. He was no longer hiding his true nature. The patient, calculating soldier was awake, and he had spent for weeks learning everything he needed to know about his enemies. The hunt was about to begin, and this time the Zephyrians would be the prey. Jake Morrison moved through the Kethover like death itself. The ship's corridors had become his hunting ground, and every Zephyrian on board was now his target. For weeks of patient observation had made him the most dangerous thing on the ship. The aliens were panicking. Their perfect trap had become their prison. Jake listened to their frightened voices through the communication device he had taken from the guard. They could not understand how a human had learned their language or accessed their systems. They thought it was impossible. Dr. Carter stayed close to Jake as they moved through the ship. She carried medical supplies and a stunner weapon. The other rescue humans followed behind them. Sam Blake limped but refused to be left behind. Rachel Stone helped carry the weakest prisoners. Jake's first target was the ship's armory. He knew exactly where it was located because he had memorized the ship's layout, from fragments of conversations and glimpses during his transport to medical examinations. The armory was protected by electronic locks, and the guards were already nervous from Jake's announcement. They kept looking over their shoulders and jumping at small sounds. Jake used this fear against them. He created noise in the ventilation system, making them think he was crawling through the air. Ducks. While they were distracted, he came at them from the opposite direction. Jake's enhanced reflexes and knowledge of Zephyrian anatomy made the fight quick and brutal. He struck pressure points that paralyzed their limbs, that knocked them unconscious with precise blows to their nerve clusters. The guards never had a chance to call for help. The armory contained enough weapons to arm a small army. Jake selected the most powerful energy rifles for his group and explosives for destroying critical ship systems. But his real advantage was not firepower. It was information. Security Chief Korthovan was trying to organize a defense. Jake listened to his orders through the communication system and smiled coldly. Korthovan was sending guards to protect areas that Jake had already secured. The security chief was always one step behind because he did not understand his enemy. Jake sabotaged the ship's internal sensors next. He knew which cables to cut and which systems to overload. Soon the Zephyrians were blind inside their own ship. They could not track Jake's movements or coordinate their defenses. Captain Exmer's voice came over the communication system. He was trying to contact the Golden Eagle, but Jake had already disabled the long-range communications. Pete Walsh could not hear the captain's calls for help. The Ketiver was cut off from the outside universe. Jake split his group into two teams. Dr. Carter led the weaker prisoners toward the escape pods. If things went wrong, they could abandon ship and hope Pete would find them. Jake took Sam Blake and Rachel Stone with him to hunt the ship's officers. The first officer they found was Velthuk. The chief researcher was hiding in his laboratory, trying to destroy evidence of his experiments. Jake had been planning this moment for weeks. Every torture session, every painful procedure, every moment of helpless rage had built up to this. Velthuk turned around and saw Jake standing in the doorway. The alien's yellow eyes went wide with terror. He recognized the human he had been experimenting on. But this was not the broken creature from the cell. This was something else entirely. Jake spoke in perfect Zephyrian. "Remember me, Doctor? You said I was brain damaged. You said humans were inferior. Let me show you how wrong you were." Velthuk tried to run, but Jake was faster. The aliens' forearms flailed uselessly as Jake systematically disabled them. Using the same pressure points he had learned from being strapped to the examination table, Velthuk fell to the floor, paralyzed but conscious. Jake looked at the laboratory. Equipment around him: needles, scanners, surgical tools, chemical injectors, all the instruments that had been used to torture human prisoners. He picked up a neural probe, the same device Velthuk had used to test pain responses. "You always wondered how much pain humans could feel," Jake said quietly. "Now you get to find out how much pain Zephyrians can feel." What happened next was precise and methodical. Jake used his perfect memory of every procedure to give Velthuk exactly what the researcher had given to human prisoners. Every test, every injection, every moment of agony was returned with interest. The alien begged for mercy in 3 different languages, but Jake's expression never changed. Sam Blake and Rachel Stone watched in silence. They had both suffered under Velthuk's experiments. They felt no pity for the alien's screams. When it was over, Velthuk was alive, but broken. Jake left him strapped to his own examination table. "You will live," Jake told him, "but you will never hurt anyone again." Captain Exmer was harder to find. The captain had sealed himself in the bridge with his remaining officers. The bridge was heavily armored and protected by multiple security systems. But Jake had spent weeks learning about those systems. Jake used the ship's own maintenance tunnels to reach the bridge. The tunnels were too small for Zephyrians to use comfortably, but Jake's human size made them perfect for infiltration. He emerged directly behind the captain's chair. Exmer spun around to find Jake pointing an energy rifle at his head. The other bridge officers reached for their weapons, but Jake was already moving. His enhanced reflexes let him target multiple enemies at once. 3 officers fell before they could draw their guns. "You made one mistake," Jake told the captain. You thought humans were just animals to be sold. You forgot that some animals are predators. Dexmer tried to negotiate. He offered Jake money, freedom, even his own ship, but Jake had heard too much over the past weeks. He knew about the planned attack on the research station. He knew about the thousands of humans who had been sold into slavery. He knew about the children who had been separated from their parents and sold to alien collectors. Jake's response was a single shot that disabled Dexmer's legs. The captain fell, screaming in pain and terror. Jake stood over him, his face showing no emotion at all. "You will tell me everything about your trafficking network," Jake said. "Every buyer, every route, every planned attack. You will give me access to all your records and communication codes. If you refuse, I will leave you here when this ship explodes." Dexmer looked into Jake's eyes and saw his own death. The human's enhanced implants glowed softly in the bridge lighting, giving him an inhuman appearance. This was not the broken prisoner from the cell. This was a weapon that had been disguised as a victim. The captain began talking immediately, names, locations, schedules, everything he knew about the criminal network. Jake's implant recorded every word, building a complete picture of the trafficking operation. While Dexmer confessed, Jake accessed the ship's computer systems. He downloaded terabytes of data about slave routes, buyer contacts, and planned raids. The Zephyrians had kept detailed records of their crimes, never imagining that a human could access their systems. Jake sent coded messages to human military forces, giving them everything they needed to strike at the trafficking network. He also broadcast the information on criminal communication channels, painting targets on every member of the syndicate. The Golden Eagle's signal was getting stronger. Pete Walsh was moving closer to the Kethover. Jake knew his old commander would be ready for anything. Pete had probably figured out that Jake was alive and fighting back. Jake gathered his people at the ship's docking bay. Dr. Carter had gotten all the prisoners to safety. Sam Blake and Rachel Stone were armed and ready for whatever came next. The other rescued humans looked at Jake with a mixture of fear and gratitude. They had seen him transform from a helpless victim into something terrifying and unstoppable. Jake Morrison was no longer just a human prisoner. He was the nightmare that would haunt the galaxy's slave traders for years to come. The hunt was far from over. Jake had lists of names, locations, and targets. The Zephyrians had made one fatal mistake when they captured him. They had given him time to think, plan, and remember every injustice. Now Jake Morrison was free, armed, and very, very angry. The galaxy's criminals were about to learn what happened when humans decided to fight back. The Golden Eagle docked with the Kethover 12 hours later. Pete Walsh came aboard with 6 armed crew members, expecting to find a ship full of dangerous aliens. Instead, he found Jake Morrison waiting in the docking bay with a group of rescued humans and a ship full of unconscious or dead Zephyrians. Pete stopped walking when he saw Jake. His old friend looked different, thinner, scarred, and with cybernetic implants glowing softly under his skin. But it was Jake's eyes that showed the real change. They were cold and calculating, like a machine built for war. "Hello, Pete," Jake said quietly. "Thank you for coming, Pete." Walsh had fought in 3 wars and seen terrible things, but something about Jake's calm voice made him nervous. "We picked up the distress signal from the New Horizons 6 weeks ago, found the wreckage and started tracking the ships that attacked it. How many of them are still alive?" Jake looked around the docking bay. 3 Zephyrian bodies lay on the floor. 15 crew members are unconscious. Captain Exmer and Chief Researcher Velthik are alive, but injured. The rest are dead. Jesus. "Jake, you did all this yourself." "I had help," Jake said, nodding toward Dr. Carter and the other survivors. "But yes, most of it was me." Pete's crew stared at Jake with a mixture of respect and fear. Taking over an entire alien ship with just a few wounded humans was not supposed to be possible. But Jake Morrison had always been different, even during the war. Jake led Pete to the ship's command center. The walls were covered with screens showing data about the trafficking network, names, faces, locations, ship routes, buyer contacts, everything the Zephyrians had collected over months of criminal activity. "This is bigger than just one ship," Jake explained. "They are part of a network that has been attacking human colonies for almost a year. Thousands of our people have been sold as slaves. Children have been separated from their parents and sold to alien collectors." Pete studied the information on the screens. The scope of the operation was enormous. Dozens of ships, hundreds of criminals, buyers from 12 different alien species. "What do you want to do about it?" Jake's answer was immediate. I want to destroy them all. Dr. Carter joined them in the command center. She looked exhausted, but determined. Jake has been planning this for weeks. He knows exactly who to target and how to find them. Jake activated a holographic display that showed star maps with marked locations. I have the locations of their main bases, the routes their ships use, and the identities of their biggest buyers. I also have their communication codes and security protocols. This is military-level intelligence, Pete said, impressed despite himself. How did you get all this? I listened. Jake replied, for weeks. I pretended to be unconscious while they talked about their operations. My implants recorded everything, every conversation, every plan, every detail about their network. Jake pulled up another screen showing financial records. They made over 50 million credits selling human slaves in the past 6 months. That money is sitting in accounts across the galaxy. I know where every credit is hidden. Pete was beginning to understand the scope of Jake's plan. You want to hit them all at once. Exactly. If we only attack 1 or 2 targets, the others will disappear. But if we strike everywhere simultaneously, they cannot escape or warn each other. Jake had already started the process, using the Kethavert-S communication system. He had sent detailed intelligence to human military forces throughout the galaxy. Colonial defense ships were already moving toward trafficking bases. Police forces were preparing raids on buyers and money handlers. But Jake was not content to let others handle everything. He had personal business to finish. The biggest buyer is someone called the Collector on Korath Prime. Jake continued. He specializes in rare and unusual humans, children, scientists, people with genetic modifications. He pays premium prices and keeps his purchases as permanent prisoners. Pete checked the star charts. Korath Prime is deep in criminal territory. It would take a fleet to attack it safely. I do not need a fleet, Jake said. I need to be smart. Jake showed Pete his plan. The Collector lived in a heavily defended compound, but he was also arrogant and predictable. He held regular auctions where criminals brought their most valuable merchandise. The next auction was in 5 days. You want to go there and pretend to be a seller? Pete asked. Better than that. I want to be merchandise. Dr. Carter looked alarmed. Jake, that is insane. If they recognize you, you will be killed immediately. Jake smiled. But there was no warmth in it. They will not recognize me. To them, all humans look the same. And they think I'm brain damaged and helpless. It will be the last mistake they ever make. Jake's plan was complex but logical. Pete would take him to Korath Prime in a disguised ship, pretending to be a small-time trafficker with unusual merchandise. Jake would be sedated and presented as a damaged human with cybernetic implants. The Collector would want to examine him personally. Once inside the compound, Jake would wake up and begin his work. His implants contained detailed floor plans of the facility, security protocols, and guard rotations that he had extracted from the Zephyrian databases. He would free the human prisoners and destroy the Collector's operation from the inside. What about the rest of the network? Pete asked. Jake activated another display showing a complex timeline. I have sent all their information to every human military force in the galaxy. In exactly 72 hours, coordinated strikes will hit 43 trafficking bases simultaneously. Their ships will be destroyed, their money seized, and their leaders arrested. And if some of them escape, Jake's expression grew colder. Then I will hunt them down one by one. I have perfect memory now, Pete. I will never forget a single face or name. They can run to the edge of the galaxy, but I will find them. Dr. Carter decided to join Jake's mission. Her medical skills would be useful for treating rescued prisoners. Sam Blake and Rachel Stone also volunteered, despite their injuries. They had suffered under the traffickers and wanted revenge. Pete's crew prepared the Golden Eagle for the journey to Korath Prime. They installed hidden weapons and modified the cargo hold to look like a slave transport. Jake spent his time studying every detail about the Collector and his compound. 3 days later, they departed for criminal space. Jake lay in a medical restraint bed, electrodes attached to his head to simulate brain damage to any scanner. He would look like a valuable but defective specimen. As the Golden Eagle entered hyperspace, Jake closed his eyes and entered the same meditative state he had used on the Zephyrian ship. But this time, he was not hiding from his enemies. He was planning their destruction. Jake Morrison had been many things in his life: a soldier, a protector, a prisoner, a victim. But now he was something new. He was the nightmare that slave traders told stories about in dark bars across the galaxy. The galaxy's criminals had made a terrible mistake when they decided to hunt humans. They thought humans were weak and helpless. They forgot that some species were dangerous not because of claws or fangs, but because of their ability to think, plan, and remember. Jake Morrison remembered everything, and now it was time for the galaxy to learn what happened when humans decided to fight back. The sleeping human was no longer sleeping. He was calculating revenge, and his calculations were perfect.